part 6. We're back for part 6 of survival skills for the school year. And we've been rolling through a lot of different kind of perspectives, whether it's, smoothing out routines, setting limits that stick, creating, a positive home culture where kids want to share and converse, and there's a lot of love and trust and respect. We want you, in our Raising Resilience family here, we want you to have tools and strategies that will help to make this school year much more survivable and even go beyond surviving to possibly even thriving amidst a global pandemic and an unprecedented back to school experience, something that many of us have never, never encountered in life. And so we're here trying to make sure that everybody feels equipped, right? And so today's topic I'm really excited about. It's about getting on the same page. Now, for some of you, it will mean just being able to have conversations about parenting and parenting topics. For some of you, this topic is going to really bring home what it means for you and your other care provider to start having meaningful conversations about parenting. But then for some of you, this is like how to take the conversations you're having and turn them into really great family meetings. For some of you, it's going to be more about just getting your kids to kind of listen and be on board with you more. So I want you to listen in for several strategies I'll be sharing with you today. We're going to be talking about avoiding power struggles by using collaborative conversations. We're going to talk about how we can give kids a voice in the conversation when we're establishing routines and boundaries and limits and rules. And I'm going to give you a motivation tool that helps to win your child's cooperation as well. The whole point here is to help us continue to converge, right? So that we have kind of mutual understanding of what our goals are as a family in the short term and long term, what our shared values are, and also a sense of teamwork, right? So that instead of kind of, opposition where pushing back on each other and having these power struggles, arguments, or even maybe you just give up and you just don't want to push anymore and you just do the things that your kids could be helping out with around the house, for example. We want to get you into a place where every family member can share, every family member has value and contributes to the household. We want to get to a place where you can solve problems together, make agreements that really stick, and identify those goals again that will help to kind of move things forward, even if it's just as simple as having an empty sink at the end of the night where all the dishes have been at least cleaned and put in the drying rack. It could be that simple. So if you're tuning in here, I see Jennifer's here. I think a couple other folks might be here as well in the Facebook space. I'm also on Zoom, so for those of you who are on Zoom, I would love to hear in the chat, what would it mean to you to have everybody more on the same page in your household? And most importantly, what would be more possible? Yeah, and I know it's kind of a funny question, but what's possible when we are more on the same page with our children and our, other caregivers, whether it's another parent or a grandparent or, a nanny, other parents in the pod, for example, which is something that is happening for many families this time of year with this pandemic. What is possible when you're more on the same page? So a few things that I've seen that are possible is that over time, you have less and less conversations just about parenting. I had a great attendee, this really smart, big-hearted, dedicated parent show up for the 6-day training. And one of the things that she shared right in our group was that without being on the same page, she pretty much spends all of her free time with her partner just talking about parenting. And she knows that in the end, it's going to be a good investment, that they're going to end up, more on the same page by having those conversations. She's really looking forward to the day where they don't have to, they have other things they get to talk about, other ways they get to connect in the evenings and weekends, where it's not so focused on figuring out what the goals are and how to get there. Yeah. That's one thing. That's what's possible. It's we get to have more time with our, co-parents and other caregivers, where we're not just focusing on, what are we going to do about this behavior? How are we going to do that? Trying to figure out how to get on the same page. For some of you, it's just less conflict, right? Just less moments where you're you're both, like you and another caregiver, are both trying to address a situation, and you're in conflict. You're really approaching it so differently that you almost don't even know how to, deal with that moment, because now you have, on top of the hard behavior or the difficult moment, you have a conflict on top of it. So Jennifer sharing with us in the Facebook group, she's saying moving towards the same goals in the same ways makes light work out of many tasks. Really good point, right? Like if you're synced up about what chores need to get done that day, who's doing what in the routines, what the rules and limits are, there's a lot less effort that needs to be put in. Like you said, light work for many tasks. And less frustration and satisfaction. Yeah, less frustration and the satisfaction of good teamwork. Right. Absolutely. I mean, how many of you have been really synced up with like a workmate, or maybe you were studying in school and you had a great lab partner. Maybe you have somebody that you did a project with in your community, maybe someone you volunteer with. Maybe there's a family member that you just happen to sync up with. And when you spend time together, there's just this ease. You're like, you just kind of make things happen together. Think of a time that you experienced that. And yeah, exactly, Jennifer. There's like the satisfaction that comes from that and a lot less frustration. Absolutely. Okay, so let's dive in. Thank you for sharing that. So one of the most important ways to avoid power struggles is by initiating these collaborative conversations. So we are constantly communicating with our children, whether we like it or not, right? There's just a lot to address. And if we're not communicating, that's also a form of communication. In other words, we're checking out, we're being hands off, not involved. So we are in communication. And so if we're going to shift to collaborative conversations, one of the things that we have to get really used to as parents is getting out of manager mode and getting into team member mode, okay? So what that looks like, and I'm not saying don't give instruction, don't give feedback, don't like be in charge of the schedule, especially if you have younger children like Jennifer you have, right? Of course you're going to be more in charge. Of course you're going to be moving things along. But there's a certain way that we communicate that conveys a spirit of teamwork, and another way that conveys more of a I'm managing you and you need to get on board or else, right? That kind of thing. Or a pleading, like, please let me manage you. Please do what I'm asking. Or you could check out. Yeah. So all those three options don't sound like less frustration and satisfaction to me. So what I found myself doing, and what a lot of smart, big-hearted parents end up doing too, is being in that manager mode. And so what I've helped folks do and kind of bridge them over through that challenge is to start these collaborative conversations with kids. Now, I often use this pushing palms metaphor, and it's so worthwhile looking at again. If you give kids something to push back on, then they will. I've been into so many live workshops back when there was such a thing. I would go up to someone in the group that, the attendees, and I would just say, would you volunteer to do an exercise with me? Put up your hand. And they put up their hand. And then I put my hand on their hand. And without saying a word, I start to push on their hand. And almost every single time the other person pushed back, or they retreated and put their hand back, and they looked really confused and kind of defeated. So what happens when we give people something to push on and we push? There is an instinct to push back. I'll even ask them, did I tell you to push back on my hand? And they're like, no, Vanessa. I was like, yeah, why did you push? And they're like, well, because you pushed, so I pushed back. And I was like, exactly. So what I'm encouraging you to do to create a bigger sense of teamwork and collaboration is to get side by side with your child. So instead of pushing like this, you're literally shoulder to shoulder, side by side, looking at a thing together. And the spirit of side by side, Jennifer, you practiced this, right? In our calm down training, where you got side by side with your child and, really tried to just notice what they were doing, kind of connecting before correcting, when you really wanted them to come over to breakfast. And you sat down and enjoyed how they were having a friendship together. They were enjoying their Legos, and you just got more side by side with them. And you even, started to enjoy the moment the way they were, instead of carrying over that story of pushing, saying like, you quickly transition, get over here, right? Like, it's time for breakfast. It's more of a push, and they can either ignore you or they can push back. Yeah. Or they can feel dominated and later on want to either have revenge or establish control another way. right? And we really don't want our kids to be sort of mindless, obedient children either. Like we love their spirits. Most of you are in this group because you have a strong spirited child, or 2 or 3 or 4. So how can we cultivate that and collaborate? Have a side-by-side conversation. So when I mean, I just really want you to visualize that, like shoulder to shoulder, sitting on the couch, looking at maybe a thing together. I would, even like having a piece of paper where you're taking notes, or you're drawing a picture, where you're outlining the routine for the week, where you're writing down your agreement about, who's going to take care of what in terms of chores, where you're writing down your agreement of like a plan for when your child hits. It's like, I'm going to ask you to put your hand in my hand, and you can even draw a picture of that, and sit together side by side, making a plan together. Even in the moment when you feel like you're going to tell a kid something, you just literally sit next to them and look at what they're looking at, and then talk to them. It's counterintuitive at first, but when you practice it 3, 4, 5, 10, 50 times, and for me, hundreds, probably thousands of times, the difference builds. Okay. And they really start to get a sense of like, oh, you're not here to manage me. You're here to be on my team, for us to like work together towards a goal. Okay. So side-by-side conversations create a spirit of collaboration. Not this. I teach this with routines, with setting limits, with all the things. Okay. All right. So that was hot tip number 1. Just to make sure that you got it, in the comments, just write side by side. Right, side by side, and even put your hands together like this, being like not pushing, side by side. Just do this for yourself, so to help you remember. Because I know in the moment, it's like you try to pull these strategies in, you're like, oh yeah, Vanessa said side by side. I better scooch over to this side and actually sit down next to my kid and have a side by side conversation. The architecture of the conversation is a whole nother module. I just went over with my year-long clients. It was a 2-hour training. And we talked about effective apologies, I statements, problem-solving suggestions, brainstorming win-win solutions. Like we had a really deep, really dense, really good training on that. So more details to come if you're in the year-long program. Caroline's here. Yes, side by side. Caroline and Jennifer, it's like a reunion. And both of you were the grand prize winners, and you're back. I'm so excited for you. You're going to keep it going, I can tell. I'll be in touch soon, by the way. Yeah, they won a month of mentorship in the year-long program, as well as a Pass the Emotional Mastery weekend. So happy for you too. And there's a way that you can get 2 free coaching, or 2 bonus coaching sessions before now and then, Caroline and Jennifer. So we should talk. Okay, back to the topic. So we have give kids a voice as our second strategy. So now we're in our side-by-side conversation, and my quick hot tip is gather your child's input. Get some sort of feedback from them, some sort of idea from them. And so one of the key things for that is asking a question that they will answer. And not just a yes or no question, okay? So here's a more open-ended one. Oh, I noticed that, when sister takes things from your hand and your sister grabs it from you, it really bothers you. Do you like it? How do you feel when she grabs it from you? Or what happens? She takes out of my hand. So you're getting them to share, for example, what they're like, help them define the problem. They're going to help define the problem. Another could be coming up with solutions or consequences. Okay, so if mommy asks you to put your hand in my hand and you say no, what should mommy do next? Should I pick you up, or should I remind you to go to your calm down corner? See, so you're building an input as you're putting your plan in place in that side-by-side conversation. Okay. So gathering input is so key. I've had kids, go through conflicts, and oftentimes our go-to is, oh, repair and move on. So it's like, this child is upset and this child's upset. They've had a chance to talk. They both apologize. Go on your merry way. However, can be really, really helpful, and I talk about this in the year-long immersion, to make an agreement before you part of like what each child, each person, individual is going to take responsibility for, or what we could do differently next time. What's our plan when this happens or that, right? And that way, what you're doing is you're actually helping the kids become invested in the moment towards the solution, because you've already made a plan and you've made an agreement, and now you're just carrying it through. The other really great thing that this does when you make an agreement and you, with the child's input, is that then when you carry it through, you don't feel as guilty or worried or unclear or confused about what to do in the moment, because you've already previewed it and made a plan together and made that agreement, and you already know that your child has had a chance to give input. You can even remind them, sweetie, this is what we planned. Remember, you told me that you wanted me to tell you, you wanted me to say, go to your calm down corner, or like do the hand signal of your lids off. Remember when I remember this is the part where you said I can put my hands out and you'll put your hands in mine, like if after they're about to hit or they hit their sibling. Remember, this is the part where I just say the word dishes to you, and you agreed you wouldn't give me a hard time, and you'd walk into the kitchen and unload and go ahead and load the dishwasher. Remember that? Yeah. So you get to almost have like a and I know. This is not news. Like, there's no reason for me to repeat myself 10 times. And there's no reason for you to give me a hard time about it, because this is what we've agreed on. And then even when they push back, you can say, oh, I hear you. I totally get it, honey. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it later tonight. But this is what we agreed to. So go ahead. I imagine how many times I've had that conversation with students. I mean, I ran a Montessori classroom for sometimes up to 48 kids. And boy, did I hold them to our agreements. Remember, we agreed that we would put our clip down once we finished snacks with the next person and go get the next person. Yeah, we made that agreement. Oh, you don't remember when? Let me bring a friend over. Do you remember when we had that class meeting last week where we, for example, yeah. So there's something so powerfully collaborative about recalling a past calm agreement that you made with your child. Now, the younger they are, the more concrete you want to be. That's why I gave the example of your hands and my hands, and you may even practice, yeah. The older they are, the more sophisticated and multi-step your agreements can be. Like, some of you have kids in your teens even, and you can say, hey, we made a whole chore chart, right? Like, we agreed that we would get started on Monday. It's 2 p.m. Monday. Looks like it's time to get going, and then they can go over to the chart and see what their chore is and go take care of it. And you can say, let me know if you need any help with that. But they've already agreed to it because you gathered their input. So it's not about us being in full control, having it all planned out, knowing exactly what to say in the moment all of a sudden. What it can be about is working with our kids and getting their input and coming up with agreements that we can carry through later. Trust me when I say it takes so much stress off of you, and it's incredibly proactive. And the kids actually learn a lot from that. They learn about how to have agreements with other people, like how to take responsibility for their part of an agreement, how to, kind of influence things in a healthy way by sharing their input when they have the opportunity. Yeah. And they get the model of someone saying, like, I'm actually holding you accountable to what you agreed to do. And I'm open to, changing this agreement later. But right now, I'm actually going to ask you to follow through on what you agreed to do. It's a really good piece for responsibility. Our kids get away with a lot. They get out of a lot. They get away with a lot. A lot of things go unchecked, and it can establish a pattern that we really don't want to, live in. Yeah. Otherwise, too much frustration, not enough ease. So from this one, I just want you to write gather input. Gather input. Gather your child's input. Or you could say give them a voice. Give them a voice. Now, it might already feel like in the moment when you're in a power struggle, or they're not listening, or something's going on that is counter to your values, counter to your goal, that they already have too big of a voice. But what I'm talking about is making sure they have a voice in establishing rules, routines, and especially boundaries and plans for how things are going to get carried through. Give them a chance to contribute to that. This is where I need to pause and say, if you're on the business page, where it says Raising Our Resilience on the top of this post, with the little hands in the circle, the sun, you're going to need to join the group to watch the rest of it. So you're going to want to click on the Raising Our Resilience part and hit join group and come on over and join us. We have the series running and up for the next few weeks. See you there. So the third point is about winning your child's cooperation with a tried and true motivation tool. So I'm going to give you a different one. I gave you interest several weeks back, how to make things interesting. That's very motivating. Jennifer and Caroline, for part of it, you were there for the the full 5 hacks, you know, at least introduce you to all 5. I have a deeper dive in July that all of my immersion members go to called the Motivation Mastery Weekend, where we learn all of these all 5 of motivation hacks from the I Care model very deeply, so we can know how to share it with our kids and with the other caregivers in our world. But today, I want to talk about R, which is relatedness. So relatedness, one of the ways that is really helpful in terms of establishing goals and establishing same pageness is understanding that we are not in an open system where we're disconnected, right? We're not isolated, and we're also not in an open system. It's a closed system that we're in. In other words, there's a finite amount of resources on this planet. It's a finite amount of time in a day, right? It's like a closed system. So one thing that is really helpful is to bring kids awareness to things like resources, especially if they're young. They don't understand time and like limited money or limited, energy or limited attention. Yeah, they're still understanding that there are like bounds to the physics of life. So we're helping them with that. So we bring it to their attention. We help them get with their sense of time. We help them to see, like, oh, we only have 2 hours, and maybe 1 hour of that we're going to be moving our bodies, and the other hour is going to be quiet time so we can rest our bodies. So they can start to understand like expending and reserving energy. We're doing those things for them. The reason I bring this up is because when we're talking about relatedness, oftentimes we're doing is we're bringing their attention to their impact on others in relationship, that we're interconnected and there's a finite amount of resources that we're sharing. Because otherwise they get a little bit into competition, or they don't understand or realize or even aware that they're having impact on other people's either emotions and feelings or resources. Yeah. So here's a great example. Think of like the worst roommate you've ever had. And it could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could be someone in college or somebody, that you have co-housed with, that will like eat the last thing and not replace it. Will like use up the last soap and not replace it. Will just like, right? And I feel like sometimes having young children in the house feels like having really bad roommates. Like they just imagine if all the things you say that your kids do, you just say, my roommate. So like my roommate threw up on the floor, then stepped in it. My roommate, left dirty dishes all over the house. My roommate spilled crackers on the floor and didn't pick it up. Like, right? My roommate went potty and didn't flush. Like, right? So there's all these things we're teaching the kids about. And what we want to think about, and the reason I bring it up like a joke, is that you want to lighten up about it. First of all, they're little kids with limited life experience, and it's pretty funny if you think of them as like this bumbling roommate, right? Who just is pretty clueless. And the other thing in the relatedness piece, though, is to like draw their attention to the impact they're having on others. Now, this is a short game and a long game. And for the short game, occasionally with younger children, you'll get through, and they'll actually say, ouch, do you see mommy's face? See, look, that really hurt. Look at the red mark on my arm. Ouch, and you're like sharing impact in this really concrete way. Other times you're going to bring it up to them and they're going to give you a blank look because they're just not yet able to take it in fully, but they are on some level. And so I had this child, many children. I had this one child in my class who just would like run right over people's feet. Like he would just run over them. And I would always have him come back and like look at the person's face and like pat their toe and say sorry. And it took like 30 to 45 times of doing that, of bringing his awareness, in this case it was a boy, bringing his awareness to the impact he was having. It finally became like salient, important enough information for him to pay attention to where his feet were going when he was running through a crowded space. It worked, but it was a long game. In the short game, the person whose toe was stepped on gets a moment of sympathy, gets checked on, so there's some repair, and they're learning that there are consequences to careless actions. Yeah, they do. They're learning it because they don't get to go to the place they were running. They have to come back and check on the person. So over time, learning happens. Yeah. So with the relatedness piece, the one that I want you to do is say awareness of impact. put that in the comments, awareness of impact. Write that right now, awareness of impact. And you can say on others, awareness of impact on others. So you're just raising their awareness of impact on others. And you're going to have to toughen up a little bit, because kids, especially under 9, whose true like neurological ability to empathize is not fully developed. I mean, it starts really emerging around 7, but some kids are later than that, some kids a little earlier. Boys have a little bit of a delay biologically, in the bell curve at least. So if they're younger than that, just be ready, ready for them to say, I don't care. And it's not that they don't actually care. It's that it's not making them have that feeling of like, oh, I'm sorry, shoot, I know how that feels. They might just like, whatever. And if your child does that, I know Jennifer and Carolyn, you're here. We have more mentorship coming for you, and maybe even those bonus sessions we're going to talk about. I can help you like work through specific scenarios so you can have examples of how you might respond to that, right? Like I just had a family who's like, what do I do when my kid is like competing for one parent's attention over the other, you know? And we had to like write out a few scripts of possible ways of responding to that. I had another mom contact me over the weekend who was like, what do I do about my kids lying? And like she's lying to my face and I'm getting super frustrated. So we wrote out like 5 different things that she could, you know, we texted it out, 6 different ways that she could respond to that. And it's not about knowing the right answer right away. It's about being willing to kind of receive the ideas and try them and see how they work, and then come back for more ideas and refinement and try again. Because I've been with hundreds of kids, you know, in my environment, in my world, including my own, and they need different things. And so I have, since I've seen it all, I give you a whole variety. Okay, so raising their awareness of impact on others, just pointing it out, describing your true feeling if it's you that was impacted, helping them see that like what happens when they spend time one place, they lose time another place. What happens if they like, you know, eat 2 ice creams when they're supposed to have 1, the next day there's no second ice cream left for them to eat, right? Like just helping them see the impact on resources and on others. Getting side by side with them to have collaborative conversations and giving them a voice in those conversations so that they, like you're gathering their input, okay? And my last master tip, which you heard in the second tip, is make agreements. Make agreements, make plans, and then carry them through in a way where you're willing to like adjust them in the future, but you stick to the agreement. So you might just say stick to the agreement in the comments to help you remember that one. Again, I go so much deeper on that in a year-long immersion, but I'm just so happy that you got to have these tips today. You don't have to wait, and you go use them. And what I'd love for you to do is come back to this video and tell me how it went. You know, even just like 1 or 2 comments, you know, just like, I tried sitting side by side, that made such a difference, or, oh my gosh, when I brought up the impact on others, they just said, I don't care. But then I tried it 2 more times and I think I finally got through. Like, these are just some examples I've seen. Yeah. And that I've also experienced. I made an agreement and it felt so much better the next time he hit or she hit, because we had a plan and I carried out the plan. Even though the plan didn't work like 100%, at least I had a plan, and that made me feel more confident, and at least I had something ready to go. I think next time I'm going to change the plan a little bit this way. That's what it's like to have mentorship and coaching, is you get to like come back and say, here's how it went. And so I'd love for you to have a taste of it right here in the group by commenting on the video. Let me know how it goes, and I'm here to support you. I'm so impressed with you, Jennifer and Caroline, and those that are listening. I'm so glad you're here in the Raising Resilience group. Let us know if there are any takeaways in particular that stood out from you from this training today, besides the 3 tips. And I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, that's a wrap. And we will be back next week to talk about how to build more positive relationships as a way to survive this back to school time and build resilience in your family. It's one of my favorite topics. You know, I did my research on motivation, the connection between motivation and thriving and striving, and gratitude practices, which is all about relationship building, it turns out. One of my favorite researchers said that gratitude is social glue. Dr. Bob Emmons, yeah. So we're going to talk about that social glue next time, building positive relationships through appreciation practices and other things, and like love languages. And we'll see you next Monday at 2. Carolyn and Jennifer, I'm going to reach out to you, and let's talk about the potential of you grabbing those bonuses. Okay, and I'll talk to you all soon. All right, lots of love for you. And what a great training, by the way, this last 2 weeks. We just had such a great group. I'm so excited for all of you that have taken the initiative to learn the calm parent strategies, to get into those master classes about lasting calm and motivation hacks, who are coming to the emotional mastery weekends. We do have a handful of passes left, only a handful, because it's really mostly for clients and prize winners. And so if that's something you're interested in, I'll throw the link up in the post so that you can have access to that as well. Otherwise, thank you and congratulations for making the time to be here. And we'll see you on the next one. All right, here it is. Ooh, by the way, Jennifer says, looking forward to making an agreement and seeing how that works. Excellent. I love it. That's a really good one, especially for your older one, Jennifer. I could see your older one really responding to that and your little one kind of following suit, hopefully. All right. See you all next time. Lots of love. Bye for now.